Round one. Fight.
Heroes never die.
I'm Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite store on the Citadel.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
Power, sex, power. They both come down to one thing.
Hungry gamers.
Hello, and welcome, boys and girls, to the Hungry Gamers Spoilercast edition. We are powered by 8bit.net and Audio Technica. I'm not so humble host, Brendan White, who can be found at Brendan8bit. And today, the Mary Jane and the Gwen Stacy to my Peter Parker, otherwise known as Saleem Abraham, who can be found at SaleemTD, and Jono Peck, who can be found at Jono himself, are joining me today on this debut Spoilercast. How you doing tonight, gents?
Not bad, thanks. I'm disappointed that Saleem got the Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy. I didn't get anything. But hey.
No. That's both of you.
Oh,
two.
right. Okay, I thought he was both of them.
Yeah. No.
What?
I was like, gee, he loves Saleem. Oh, good.
I'm doing good. I know who Mary Jane is. I don't know who Gwen Stacy is. You might have to fill me in. She didn't feature.
Can we kick him off the podcast yet? Is it too late?
Yeah, let's find some other Spider-Man fan out there that can fill those spots and actually know who Gwen Stacy is.
Let's get Jack Cruz in here. He's probably very angry to hear this already. Gwen Stacy's name shall not be sullied.
Yeah, so Dream, Gwen is one of the other Peter Parker love interests from the various Spider-Man universes. You may remember her as Emma Stone in
the Amazing Spider-Man,
the Spider-Man film with Andrew Garfield.
Andrew Garfield, yeah. That's the extent of my Spider-Man knowledge is the movies, the Raimi films, and then the Garfield films, and now the Tom Holland film / Avengers universe. Yeah. And now this game.
You're getting there.
Yeah, now this game. I'm learning.
You're getting there.
Yeah.
So we're here. This is our first ever spoiler cast we're doing as a little offshoot to the Hungry Gamers podcast, which is part of your usual weekly programming as part of the hashtag 8bit Collective. And all three of us here, we've decided to give this a crack based off our love. Yeah, I'd say love's probably an adequate verb to use for this. For Spider-Man, which was released a few weeks ago now, done by Insomniac Games, PS4 exclusive. I thought we could probably lead things off with our general thoughts on the game, what we've thought about our experiences in there, and then we can sort of lead off into a few other subtopics we've got to sort of try and cover off on this episode as well. So, Dream, did you want to start us off?
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm not as familiar with the Spider-Man universe as I think a lot of people are, and certainly not as much as you two are. But I have enjoyed my exposure to Spider-Man in the past. This game to me is really cool. I thought this was one of the most enjoyable games I've played in a long time. I do have a few like nitpicky little things about it, which we can touch on later. But I think that those things are very small, very tiny compared to the big picture that the game actually is. I can't believe that I'm still not bored of swinging around through New York. It's amazing. Like, you can do it from the word go, and it never gets old, and it only gets more and more fun as you unlock different talents and stuff. Surely that should get old, but it hasn't. I don't understand why.
I'm with you there. Like, I got the Platinum Trophy yesterday, and the last probably, 3 or 4 hours of that was mostly just swinging around and doing the random crimes that pop up. And yeah, it was very grindy, but at the same time, it's enjoyable enough to swing around that I was willing to do it, and I wasn't like absolutely hating it, which you should in most games. Like, that part of the game is like a pure just grind, but it was still pretty fun for Spidey to swing around and do all that.
That's interesting that you were chasing the plat and it didn't really become a chore. I know with a lot of games, when you are trying to do those final monotonous tasks, it can feel like you're almost pulling teeth. But the fact that Insomniac nailed that sort of web slinging traversal. And you can see, obviously, they did Sunset Overdrive and the freedom of movement that you experienced in that. Definitely just bit of a sort of nod towards both respective titles. I think there's a bit of the movement and the freedom of movement between Sunset and Spider-Man as well. So Insomniac really have found the special sauce for that sort of free roam traversal through these environments that they create.
Yeah, it reminded me, like, the movement and how fun it was to navigate around the city. It reminded me of infamous Second Son, which was the first game that I platinumed probably like 3 years ago. And like in that game, the story a lot of people had issues with, but using your powers and just running around and the different ways that you could navigate that universe was so much fun to me. It's like probably the first big AAA game that I played on PS4. So it did take me back to that feeling of, it just feels good to be this person and to have these abilities. It's just, something I really got a kick out of.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like the Spider-Man story that we're on in this game, I think they were saying that Peter Parker's sort of been Spider-Man for around 8 to 10 years. I can't remember the exact figure it was. So
Yeah, wow.
We aren't doing the tried and tested and going back to the well Spider-Man finding his powers, getting bitten by the spider, struggling with high school and all that. I like that it is a bit more of a mature Peter Parker who sort of is a bit more, well, not really grizzled, but he's up to the task.
What's going on, yeah.
Well, he's
through puberty and through Spider-Man puberty.
But it's more than that. And even though we're not necessarily seeing the Spider-Man origin story that we've seen 3 times in the movies, what we're seeing is a Peter Parker who's still interesting because he's struggling to find the balance between Peter Parker the person and Spider-Man the superhero. And you see that in every facet of his life. He's struggling to keep on top of, his money and his apartment. He loses his apartment. He's struggling to, figure out things with MJ. He's late for his work with Dr. Ock. And you see that all throughout the first, I'll say, 2 acts of the game. And I think that in spite of the fact that, it's a superhero game and it's a superhero story, so you can't, it's hard to inject an arc into Peter Parker's story in the game. You still have a lot of really interesting things happening to him and also to the people around him.
Yeah.
I like that they took the time to sort of flesh him out in both of his personas, where they've given him some real weight. And he's part of this living, breathing world, and he's got people that depend on him or worry about depending on him, I guess. In that first act where Doc Ock's always calling him and he's constantly upset with him because he's running late or he's forgotten this meeting, and the head of defense is coming in. He's like, apologies, Doc, I'll be there shortly, totally forgot. And issues with MJ and forgetting that he had dinner with Aunt May on one night. He's a very relatable protagonist, which I really like.
That's you, is it?
Well, he just doesn't have it all under control. He's
pretty much
he's flawed, definitely flawed.
Yeah. Sadly, the spider that bit me just made me sick. I do not have any abilities, so that's where the comparison ends. Sadly, but
where does it rank for you, Brendan? Like game of the year, is it like top 3, top 5?
It's definitely top 3. I don't think it's the top for me at this stage. Like I'd rank God of War and Detroit Become Human above it.
The PlayStation trifecta.
It's interesting, when I was sort of saying those out loud, I'm like, they're all PlayStation 4 exclusives. But also Shadow of the Tomb Raider is, I'm not finished it yet, but it's inching its way into not sort of game of the year, but on the same enjoyment level as I'm having with Spider-Man for completely different reasons. But it's a great game. Insomniac smashed it. I loved it. As Dream said, there's a few gripes that I've had with the game, but nothing that sort of soured the overall experience. Yeah. What about you, Jono? Yeah. How do you feel it stacks up?
I think it's still behind God of War, and part of that is because God of War was such a unique experience. I feel like just hit everyone in the feels, and it was such a unique like I said, a unique experience, but the narrative and the way that it was interwoven with the gameplay was something we haven't really seen, whereas Spider-Man was a hell of a lot of fun, but it was very derivative, like it's standing on the shoulders of giants and the awesome games like the Arkham games that have come before. And that's not to say that it's I wouldn't say it's too much like Arkham, like some people have said, but it's okay to be like those games because they're fantastic games. And even if it is just a Spider-Man reskin with his powers instead of Batman's, like you're getting to be Spider-Man, and that's what people have wanted, you know, or have been enjoying for the past decade of mediocre Spider-Man games, but people still love them. And here we have a AAA studio being able to put all those pieces together, take the IP, apply the lessons that we've learnt from a lot of games that have done this open world thing like Infamous and Arkham, and, you know, the problems that people have with maybe like Assassin's Creed and the collectathons, and making them meaningful and fun. And I think that they really pulled it all together. I don't usually rate games when I do reviews, but for me, this is around that like probably 8.5, 9. And I feel like being a game that Insomniac put together in 3 years is pretty remarkable, and that when they make a sequel, which we'll get to later in terms of discussion, I think that's going to be the game that really does that God of War level. I wasn't expecting, or I wasn't anticipating this exact experience. It's something new that we might not have seen before.
100%. I think, yeah, with the inevitable sequel, Insomniac will really have hit their straps. I think they've stuck the landing with Spider-Man on this one, and I'm pretty well in agreement around that 8.5 to maybe 9, depending on how I'm feeling, if we're going to score this out of 10.
Yeah. It's hard to compare it to Detroit.
But a lot of that's probably from...
Yeah, it's hard to compare it to Detroit because they're so different. Like, they could not be more different two kinds of games there. But yeah, it asked me at the end of the year, but at the moment I probably had more fun with this than Detroit. But Detroit just did, again, like God of War, it did something that I haven't seen done that well to that extent. So, yeah.
Yeah, and as you said, it's like it's a different kind of enjoyment playing a game like this as opposed to those two other bigger, massive IPs. Like I was playing a lot of Spider-Man, and I had Archer beside me playing, and he's a little 5-year-old kid who's just sort of discovered Spider-Man as well. And I put a PlayStation controller in his hand, and I sort of hid mine away and sort of was, directing and steering him into the game and getting him to press the button. I was doing it sort of, out of his field of view, but watching him think he's Spider-Man and he's slinging around and punching all these people and doing all this magical stuff as Peter Parker was a really, really fantastic sight to behold. And I think it's sort of further improved my feeling during this time spent playing the game.
Very cool.
Anything else you wanted to mention, Dream, on your general thoughts before we maybe pivot our way towards sort of the story and the character within the game?
Not too much. I think you guys definitely rate it higher than me. Okay. I think that's definitely clear now.
What's your initial feeling? Because, complete transparency, you haven't finished the game just yet. You're close.
No, I'm close. I've completely spoiled it for myself. But I got to say, even where I'm up to, I don't necessarily feel the pull, say that you two have to really just get this thing done ASAP. I think it's a fine game, and I think it's a fun game, and I will enjoy. I can see myself enjoying the rest of it, the rest of the journey. There's not long left for me. I'm up to that last little part with the boss fights, but I just think that it's really simple in what it does, and it does what it does really well. But you can't call the game challenging. I think it's really a stretch to say that this game is in any way, shape, or form challenging, short of a few exceptions like the Taskmaster collectibles and things like that. Like for the most part, unless... But even the other optional stuff isn't very difficult. It's more that unless you're being swarmed by 1,000 enemies with explosives, most combat's fine. Most boss fights are fairly straightforward. But again, it's just that it's an enjoyable game. You talk about a game of the year. I don't think it. Like, I think because it's Spider-Man, and it's been hyped up for ages. It'll be in contention for a lot of game of the year awards. But like, we've still got Red Dead 2 coming. Is Last of Us 2 this year as well?
No.
Or is it next year?
No. That'll be like 2020 is my general feeling.
You've got a bit more time to finish The Last of Us, Saleem. A little bit more time.
I'm never finishing The Last of Us. That's never happening.
Oh, you son of a gun.
But yeah, I look, I like this game, and I think it's an enjoyable game. I don't think this is a game of the year game.
What would you rate it out of 10? We've put our nuts on the table.
I don't do number ratings anymore. I'm joining the rest of the games media now, Brendan, and I'm just giving it its pros and cons. Look, it's strong. It's like it's definitely +7. You know, it's just not 9. It's definitely not a 9.
Okay. We'll get to that when you do your when you get to your nitpicks and that kind of thing. I guess we'll hear a bit more about your issues.
Yeah, sure. I think just going back to a comment you made earlier about how it may or may not be, you know, a clone or what it borrows from other games. I think, and you know, this might be the magic of memory, but I think it actually borrows a lot from Spider-Man 2 from PlayStation. There's a lot in here that I think
you're not wrong. The bones
is also
there.
And I think it's exactly, and I think that what makes that such a great game makes this a great game too. The core, you know, just the freedom of movement, even the annoying little things like crimes are actually kind of fun to stop and sort out.
My goodness, there is some crime in this game. Like outside, obviously, of the core story, you can't go a suburb without someone getting carjacked or a jewelry store getting robbed or a shootout on a rooftop or some random bad guy with a rocket launcher on his shoulder just waiting to do some bad stuff. Like, man, if this is... Like, I've been to New York a few times. I don't remember it being this bad, but if this is the current sort of climate in New York these days, I'm not going back for quite some time.
It's a dangerous place. It's obviously a very dangerous place. Thank God for Spider-Man.
And where's the Fantastic Four and Jessica Jones and Daredevil when all this is going on?
Yeah, like...
They're in this world.
Yeah, like you do the photo at the bar there and Jessica Jones's detective agency. You get a photo out the front of there and you go past sort of Stark Tower and all that kind of stuff. I love those little eggs and nods. But let's talk story. Let's talk characters. Jono, maybe lead us off. What was your overall feeling on the narrative in Spider-Man?
I think it is, for a video game story, very strong. I think it's probably up there with the best that Arkham had. Maybe not. I don't think it quite beats Arkham Asylum, but for a Spider-Man story, which they're always pretty predictable, and this one wasn't really that different to that. But I think the characters really made it for me. Like, this version of Peter Parker is so lovable, and you just want to like play video games with him on the couch. He's a cool dude. And MJ they found a way to make her interesting and add something to the story rather than just being a love interest, which is good to see, because their whole relationship of they have broken up, I think that makes it so much more interesting than he's trying to win her affections or he's trying to keep his powers secret while they're dating, and like she gets captured and he has to save it. Like, that's not fun. That's not interesting. But I think the most interesting relationship was Doc Ock and Peter. I really loved that, and that wasn't something that we knew necessarily going into the game was going to be a big part of it, but it really was at the core of this experience over 15 or 20 hours. And yeah, those cutscenes between them were always really interesting. They looked amazing too. Like, I will say, apart from Detroit, this game has some of the best facial models that I can remember seeing on the PS4. Right up there with probably Uncharted 4 and that kind of that level just below Detroit. But yeah, I think that they made Doc Ock into a really interesting character and a not relatable, but a sympathetic one where you can see the reasons that he becomes the villain. It's not just like the rest of the villains, apart from Mr. Negative, you kind of just... they're bad, but you see the whole transformation take place within the course of this game. The game really is Doc Ock becoming Doc Ock from Octavius. That's probably what it boils down to, yeah.
Yeah, I really like that they fleshed him out. I like how he becomes this villain, but he's blind to it because he's sort of just so sort of tunnel vision with his pursuit of justice and doing right and everything else. He's multi-dimensional. Outside of Mr. Negative, the Rhino and Shocker and Vulture and all these other guys from the Sinister Six, they're just big bad guys without much sort of depth to them outside of being big bad guys. So
Mr. Negative got a bit of an arc there, which was good as well, but not to the same extent.
Yeah, he was a great character, and it certainly sets things up well for the future. Maybe if this, just completely spitballing, becomes a trilogy, who knows? Maybe the final boss in Game 3 is going to be Doc Ock, and it goes full circle that way or something like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed him as a character. Spider-Man and Peter Parker, very believable. Yuri, I think Lowenthal is how you pronounce his surname. He was great in the role for the voice and the character work as well. He's probably one of my favorite Spider-Mans. Outside of, I've got a little bit of a soft spot for Tom Holland and sort of the innocence he brings to that role as well, but I definitely like Yuri in this role more than, say, Andrew Garfield and
Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire. I was going to say, what's the guy that rides Seabiscuit? I really like him. I'm in agreement with you. The character facial animations were fantastic. Wide range of emotions, especially sort of a couple of the very emotional scenes near the end of the game. Very, very sort of gripping and pulling on them heartstrings. But I like that they fleshed out MJ. I like that they went away from her traditional story of being a gorgeous sort of supermodel is the most common threads that they connect with her story, and they've given her a role in the Daily Bugle as opposed to Peter Parker being the freelance photographer working there, and she's a cutting edge, hard hitting journalist trying to find the nitty gritty stories. I like that they sort of gave her a bit of depth, and she's a believable heroine in her own right. But yeah, Dream, what do you think? I could rant all day.
Yeah, look, I could echo a lot of what you were saying, Jono. So I think they really treat the relationship between Peter and MJ with a lot of respect. And I think as far as relationships go, I think if you've had one and it didn't end well, you can probably empathize a lot with both Peter and MJ. The scene where he's walking and texting MJ after the fight with Lee. I remember very clearly writing similar texts and receiving similar texts, and they've written it so well. And you do like MJ, and she is a bit of a badass, and she is quite fearless. A lot of the stuff she's doing
not smart
is crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but she gets away with it. So it's all good, I guess. I think it's, look, this game has the same problems that I think the hero films have, in that it's hard to actually, as an outsider, disassociate what is actually just great storytelling versus what is fan service. Because you don't know, you don't have a measuring stick. You guys can look at all of it and say, oh, this is a reference and this is and I look at it and I say, why are they telling me this? And I think it does pretty well in that regard. I think it walks the line really well. Like, there are some characters that I just don't understand entirely, which are not about the game. It's more about the universe. Like, why is he called Jefferson Davis? Jefferson Davis.
I didn't even know that.
Do either of you know that?
I think he is an established character, but I didn't know what the connection was to Miles, apart from having this, like, being his father. But I didn't know why they had different names.
Yeah, I'm not too sure of that part either. I know of Miles Morales, but don't know those other parts attached.
It strikes me as it's such a weird name to use, because Jefferson Davis is the president of the Confederate state, right? He is a slave owner with like so many slaves. So to use him for an African American character in Marvel in this day and age, it just seems like a conscious choice, but I couldn't work it out. I couldn't work out why you would use a slave owner, his name.
And he gets touted as a hero, like sort of.
Well, he's a hero, yeah. Like the character in the games, he's a hero. He's an absolute hero.
That's interesting. I never knew that. So now it makes me go,
Yeah, I thought I wasn't sure if I was remembering correct, and I went back and looked, and yeah, the guy's name's absolutely Jefferson Davis. The Miles Davis character, I think I could take or leave. Like, that character I know is in the broader universe, and in fact, I'm pretty sure he's the central character in the movie that's coming up at the end of the year, the animated film. But like, that character, you can take or leave. Like, that guy doesn't need to be in this game at all, and you still have almost the exact same story, even with Jefferson Davis, the hero, dying as he does. So that, like, to me is like,
Yeah,
It's definitely, he's in there to set things up for the future of this franchise.
And it also gave you a glimpse of Peter and his the things that he's dealt with in the past. Like, the position that Peter was in 8 years ago is basically where Miles is now, with his uncle dying and being really full of anger and having to grieve and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but none of that comes, like, you know that. And I know that. I know that his
everyone knows that,
his
though,
uncle
Saleem.
died. Everyone knows with great power comes great responsibility. It's like one of the most amazing lines in all of cinematic history. But like, in terms of the game and its story, it's not in there, so it's hard to actually connect that thread unless you actually know.
But everyone does. That's the thing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tidbit.
Like, diving into those universes, Miles Morales, he exists in the Ultimate Universe, and that's actually the universe where Peter Parker dies, and then he dons the Spider-Man moniker. So I don't know if they're setting that up to go down that way. Like, Insomniac is sort of, most of the storytelling they're doing comes from that Ultimate Universe, but they've done their own sort of creative writing through that, and, you know, creating their own little plots within there that didn't exist. So, but they're definitely taking ideas and concepts from there. So maybe in the future, but like, maybe Peter Parker.
Yeah, but like, I'll give you an example of where I think you could cut Miles. Where, like, so what Dr. Ock does really well, and the relationship between him and Peter in this game, is that he gives Peter a lot of chances to be human and to actually, you know, digest the world around him and convey really well thought out thoughts and feelings. And like, an example of that is where Oswald pulls all of the money out of Dr. Ock's lab, right? And so Peter now knows that he doesn't have a job anymore, and that goes on for like at least two story missions, if I remember correctly, a little bit longer. And he sits with that decision before he goes back and says, look, I'll just do it for free. And you as the gamer get to see Pete actually do something really, really nice, like really genuinely good around a world where he's just beating up bad guys. You actually get a moment like where it breathes, and you see that he's actually a really good person. It speeds through those moments with Miles where he's all of a sudden got Miles a job at the Feast Center, and that just kind of gets really quickly telegraphed in a phone call. And it's like, oh, that's a nice thing to do, but it's like that relationship isn't treated with anywhere near as much, I guess, priority. And obviously Dr. Ock winds up being the bad guy, but like, I just, like, again, I think you could cut Miles out of the whole thing and it'd still be almost exactly the same kind of game.
I think you're right.
I get you.
Minus a couple of Miles transfers where you're playing Miles. Also, he's a hacker. Yeah. I didn't get that at all. I don't know where that came from, but he's hacking drones willy-nilly
for it. Yeah. I think that it's a tough thing to pull off this, like something like Spider-Man. You got people who are the most hardcore of hardcore, and you have to cater to them as well as the person that knows nothing, or to at least someone like you, Saleem, that's just seen the movies. So I think that's the in-between that they found, and I think that, like, most people will be pretty happy with what they got there in terms of not going too hard into the minutiae of all these side characters and that kind of, and you get that with some of the suits. There's like references to different things with that, but yeah, I mean, it's tough, and I think it's something that you can criticize, but it's also pretty easy to overlook as well.
Yeah, it's more of an overlook than a criticism, I think.
And on that kind of idea, I had a crazy thought during that last mission where you're fighting Dr. Octopus and it's looking pretty grim. Have you guys both... I'm going to give spoilers for Red Dead Redemption, so if you care about that game, block your ears. But... yeah, you know, John Marsden dies at the end of that game, and you finish the game as his son.
Yeah, and I can't stand his son.
Yeah, he was annoying.
Cannot stand. Yeah, when they fast forward to him being, you know, prepubescent, early adult, son of John Marsden. He just annoys me.
Yeah.
But anyway,
and his voice was just different from John. But anyway, I had this thought, like, what if Peter dies and then the end game you're playing as Miles? That would be pretty cool. And that would set up the second game immediately. But they didn't go in that direction. And
that Ultimate Universe, I'm telling you, it's happening.
It's obviously from the post-credits scene that we can talk about now because of spoilers, but Peter knows that Miles has the powers now. There's no way that he can't be a huge part. Whether you control both of them or just one of them, he's definitely going to be a big part of that game.
Well, they let you control both of them in this game. So,
and when we get to the nitpicks, I was not a fan of those sections.
No. Let's wait. Let's wait till the nitpicks because you and I can definitely jive on that.
Were there any other like big twists or anything that you guys wanted to talk about? Like Aunt May dying, did you guys see that coming?
That's where I was going to go. I did not see that coming at all, and that's why I think all cards are on the table for future games where anyone could be killed off. Maybe they're going Game of Thrones style here and no one is safe. Like Aunt May is a staple of the Spider-Man universes, and from my knowledge, I don't think she's ever been killed off in any form of Spider-Man. So that was big, and it was a very touching moment. Like, you're trying to find the Devil's Breath cure to save a life and everything like that, and you get there right at the end and you nearly sort of put it into the IV to potentially save her, and that hit me in the feels. That hit me in the feels. I'm a big softie, and I was welling up a little bit.
I've seen a lot of people tweeting out like finishing the game in tears. I wasn't one of them, but I wouldn't blame anyone for welling up at that point. Sam, you got a funny look on your face.
No, I'm just trying to remember if May dies in Spider-Man 3 or not. I think she does. I think there's a Aunt May dying scene, and that's what gets Peter. Look, don't quote me on this. It's been years, but I'm pretty sure that's the thing that brings MJ back to Peter. Like, that's the catalyst for them to start talking again. Is May dying? I could have that wrong.
That film is sort of dead to me with their treatment of Venom anyway, so I try and just blank that from my memory.
All right, whatever.
But yeah, who would you say would be your favorite character, either on the side of good or the side of bad in this game? Who did you find most enjoyable or most fleshed out, or just who's your favorite and why?
I think every time that Doc Ock was on the screen, the performance was really compelling, and that's probably for me the standout, because like you look at Doc Ock usually and he's kind of boring. Like, he's just a crazy scientist with extra arms, but they made him so like complicated. And like you talked about before, how he couldn't see himself becoming the villain, but there was also this element where they added like some health issues that made you go like, how much, like, that's obviously motivating his drive to work on this equipment, but then Peter finds out that the equipment is going to have a negative effect on his brain patterns or whatever. So how much of this is him not realizing he was becoming evil, and how much of it is just this technology that's consumed him is actually changing his brain? And I liked that element where like Peter would never actually want to hurt him, even though he was doing something completely evil and hurting people. Like, this is still someone that Peter cares about, and it kind of it's almost like that like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader thing where like, I know that you're good, but I have to fight you. And I think that made him a really compelling character, and one that just had my interest the whole way through the game.
And that final battle you have with him on the side of Oscorp, it's such a breakneck speed. And I like that they sort of weave the cutscenes in amongst the combat as well. I think it was really, really, really well executed. Probably the best boss battle in the game as far as my perspective. But I'm with you on the Ark and a few other characters, even though he was nothing more than almost a radio podcast host. I loved all the Jonah Jameson sort of cuts where you just got this egomaniac podcaster throwing hate speech at Spider-Man all the time. I think that was a good little touch to it. But I'm going to be cliched and probably say Spider-Man was my other favorite. I liked the development of him. And Spider Cop, like, that where there was funny. Sort of those sort of youthful exuberance thrown in there where he's excited and he's trying to be a detective working with Yuri, the policewoman, the police chief. Can't remember what was her official role.
I don't think she was a chief, but yeah, she was a high-ranking cop of some sort.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think a lot of the characters were well put together, and yeah, I'm just going to be cliched and go with Peter Parker as a whole. I think because I'm that kind of guy.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think Peter Parker, and rightfully so. You'd hope that the titular character is also, interesting, or at least one of the most interesting characters in the game. I really liked Peter. This isn't a game where you get to make any real significant decisions.
No.
It's all made for you, and I think that you every step of the way can kind of agree with what Peter's doing or what Peter's trying to do. So I think that's probably why he's number one. Every time I like Electro. I know nothing about Electro, but it baffles me why a shock of Volts doesn't just kill Spider-Man. And when I was chasing Electro, I just kept thinking, why can't I play Electro? I want to play Electro. So yeah, if I had to pick a villain, I'd pick Electro right now.
Yeah, so on the sort of the rogues gallery of baddies that they showcase through here, was there anyone you thought didn't need to be there or was unnecessary? Obviously, Electro, Vulture, Tombstone, the Shocker, Scorpion, Rhino, and then you've got Mr. Negative, you've got Dr. Ock, and then you've got Kingpin, who was the tutorial boss battle, really. That sets up the game.
And Taskmaster. I never heard of him before, but he was there. I think everyone had their place. They didn't go too hard on any of the any of the bosses apart from Doc Ock and Mr. Negative. You didn't. The rest were not filler, but they had their place because you got to have someone besides those guys to fight. You got to build up anticipation, and it did feel like you were working your way up to, the head bosses, and I thought that worked really well. And the fact that you didn't see them until it was 2/3 through the game until you saw the Sinister Six, and that's also something I will mention. I kind of wish they didn't show that part of the E3 demo. And I know that they kind of had to build up hype and to show, hey, we have all these characters that you love, but man, that breakout scene, that mission would have been so mind-blowing if you didn't expect it, I think.
Yeah. 100%. One thing that I was expecting the whole time and the payoff never happened was obviously Mr. Osborn, Norman Osborn transitioning into the Green Goblin.
Yeah,
I was waiting. And there was a tell when you were doing one of the MJ sleuth missions. There was the grenade sitting on his desk and the mask, and it's just when's it happening?
Yeah, there's also in the boards there you can see his hoverboard if you interacted with the boards in that mission. So I picked up on that too. I was waiting.
I wasn't, because I just felt like the build up in this game is about Doc Ock, and they have to save something for the next one. And I think that will be a story about. Well, we're gonna get to that later in this podcast. But I think that you have to save something. You can't just shoot everyone out in the first game.
Yeah, you can't discharge all your web in the first
exactly.
minutes. You gotta pace your web shooting.
Yeah.
Exactly. Are we in gripes yet? Are we in gripes at the moment?
No, we're going to sort of pivot.
All right, I'm going to circle back to the ensemble of villains when we get to gripes.
Okay.
Saleem can't wait for the gripes, but
I'm so ready for gripes.
You are known as Mr. Negative in our Spider-Man universe here. Not really, but that works for this podcast. Anyway, so let's move on to the spider suits, the abilities, the combat, the traversal in more detail. Did you guys lock on to a preferred spider suit? Obviously, they're all for aesthetic purposes, and then the abilities are where you get your variations.
Yeah.
From there, did you have a few that you found using the entirety of your playtime?
I have to say that I really like that they did design it that way so that you could mix and match however you wanted. I think if you were locked into specific powers on suits, it would just kind of kill it a little bit. There are a ton of suits. First 24. Of all, yeah, which I'm assuming reference different comic books and different stories and stuff. Yeah, okay.
You would be correct,
It's
sir.
a fair assumption,
Okay.
yes.
I like the noir suit, that old school leather with goggles.
The black one.
1930s.
Yep.
Yeah, I rolled that for most of my time there, and then I also rolled the negative suit, which took a little while for my eyes to adjust to, but didn't hate slinging around in that. I didn't really use the suit powers all that much, just because to be honest, I forgot, and also didn't really feel like I was ever in a fight where I was like, what else can I do to get me out of this situation? But hold on, we'll wait for gripes. But what I did love was the impact web. I loved
so fun.
just slinging one of those bad boys and watching someone fly to the wall. It was fantastic.
Yeah. That and the same as the the trip mine one was the same. Just seeing these guys just get smashed.
Yeah.
That's
fun.
What about you, Jono? Did you have a couple, a suit or two that you settled on for the majority of your playtime?
So I talk about the suits in a bit of detail in a video that's up on our YouTube channel now, which is basically it's like a 10-minute video going through every suit in the game and where it comes from. Because when I found all these suits, I'm like, oh, this one's cool. I wonder where it comes from. And I really liked in the Arkham games how they would give you a suit and you'd see where it came from, and even just the breakdown of the different characters, it would tell you when their first appearance was. But they didn't include any of that, which I was a bit disappointed by. So that video's up there now and goes through all the different suits and special powers. But the ones that I used the most were probably the Stark suit, which is, I think, the one that Tony Stark gives Spider-Man in Civil War. It's just like a kind of updated version of the classic suit, which looks really cool in the game. I used the Scarlet one as well, which is like the hoodie, the sleeveless hoodie. That one's from the 90s, but it holds up pretty well after 24 years or something. So yeah, I thought that one was cool. And I really liked I can't remember what it's called. It's called Vintage or something, and it's the cell-shaded suit.
Yeah,
Did you
and it
use
looks
that
like it's
one?
ripped straight from a comic.
From the 30s, the 30s one, right?
No. It's it's from the 60s, but it basically just looks like a comic book, and it's that cell-shaded look, and the light bounces off it in a different way than the rest of them, and that's really cool. The Iron Spider, I think, was the other one, which we saw in Infinity War, and it has the extra arms that jump out and just mess people up. Really useful in melee combat. So that was the power that I probably used the most of, because if there was 6 guys around me, I'd just activate that power, just mash square and take out everyone all at once. What was your preferred one?
I'm with you. I was rocking the Scarlet Spider for a while. Then I shifted. I did a bit of Spider Punk for a few hours with his little mohawk and his little denim vest with all the badges and his little Chuck Taylor equivalents or whatever he had on his feet. But then I settled into the dark suit, the one you get from the Black Cat sort of little collectible arc. I really like the look of that one. And another one I wanted to give some mention to is the anti-Ock suit that you build for the last battle against Doc Ock. I think that thing looks the business. On the ability side, the shock gauntlets I was using pretty heavily throughout the game, just because you can do mass damage. And when you are jumping into a group of enemies, those shock gauntlets are great because it was just chaining electricity across enemies of all shapes and sizes. And then the Spider Bro, that thing saved my ass a fair few times.
That's right.
So that were two that I definitely, for anyone that's listening to this that hasn't played yet or hasn't finished yet, they're two abilities that will certainly do you enough justice to succeed as a web slinger pretty easily as well, I dare say.
Yeah.
Collectibles, what did you think? There was an absolute bucket load of collectibles and little sort of side missions and quests and things you could do. I'm just going to say one thing before you guys jump in. no wonder Peter Parker is broke, because the amount of money he spent on backpacks is astronomical. What was it, 55 or 60? I can't remember which one.
55, yeah.
There's apparently one of them explains why he has so many backpacks. I missed that completely. I don't know what the Easter egg is there, but yeah, apparently it's out there.
Yeah, but what did you think?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the backpacks mostly because each one had something inside of it that added a little bit more lore and a little bit more backstory. And you could kind of fill in the blanks depending on where you're getting the backpack. Like if it was at the university, it would be like one of these textbooks, or on top of, I think, the Avengers Tower, there's like some sand in a vial. I'm guessing that's like a Sandman reference. So yeah, I think that it did a good job of filling in his backstory and explaining, like, this is Peter Parker who's seen some things. Like, he's had his share of adventures already. And
he's had 55 backpacks worth of adventures.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And if you know, you can have collectibles that actually add something more than just, oh, here's, you know, a feather that's floating through the sky or whatever it might be in some other games. I think that they did a good job of making them seem like attainable and worth getting. Some of them, like the research stations, I had a bit of a gripe with, which I can get to later in the nitpicking section. The pigeons weren't that much fun. The landmarks I absolutely loved, because New York City, Manhattan, is like my favorite city in the world, and I just love to see these recreations of places that I've been to, or if not places I've been to, then places that I've seen in the Marvel TV shows, like the Jessica Jones bar and the offices for Foggy and Matt Murdock, and just little MCU things like that were littered around there, even like the Stark Tower. So yeah, I think that the landmarks were probably the one that I went looking for the hardest to start with.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an easy city to get lost in, but enjoy being lost in. Yeah, it sort of hit me, I think, on that sort of same train of thought when I first slung into Central Park, when you do one of those early missions and just running around and sort of web slinging through the tree lines and things like that. And I'm like, hey, I took a horse carriage across that little bridge one time and things like that. Like, I really liked that aspect to the game where I was like, hey, I've been past there, or I know that, or I've got photos of myself in front of these things, and now I'm taking really bad photos of these things as I move really swiftly. But Dream, what do you think? The collectible side, the side missions and things like that, did you find them tedious? Were you loving it? Did you find yourself doing more of that than the main story through most of your time?
Yeah, like I think this is going to be one that'll really depend on your taste as a gamer, like whether you're the kind of completionist that does collectibles, or if this is more just like a bit of added fat, I guess. I actually did enjoy it. I like the backpacks. I thought the backpacks were a lot of fun. The backpacks, just doing the backpacks mechanically taught me a lot about how to actually navigate the parkour system and stuff, because sometimes they'd be in very odd positions. And it's good that you get a little bit of lore with it, you know. Even if you don't necessarily know the universe, I think it just makes you more familiar with the characters, so that's a lot of fun. Yeah, I definitely had favored ones over others. I definitely also got to a point in the game where I was like, no more collectibles. Like, unless it's on my way, unless it's a landmark on my way, I'm not going to go, because I was clearing zones, not realizing necessarily that more things will pop up later. And it just kind of makes sense to do that shit at the end after you've done the main story
Black
missions.
Cats and stuff like that.
The Black Cat stuff, like those science,
the Taskmaster ones.
The Taskmaster ones pop up, and then the I forget
pigeons
the name now.
up.
The sable zones as well that pop up towards the end there as well. Yeah, so it just gets a lot, like, it gets very overwhelming very quickly, the amount of collectibles to actually get through. But at the same time, like the crimes that occur randomly, they're fun little things to take you away from the main story and let you kind of navigate your way around the city. So I actually really think they work well in the game.
I'll say one thing I loved and constantly found myself going back to. Octavius Industries all the time was the little
yes.
circuitry.
Yeah.
I freaking
sort of
love
tasks.
those games. Yeah,
There weren't enough of those. There should have been 50
know.
of those circuitry
Yes.
things.
Yeah,
It's
them
oddly-
and then
oddly
like
satisfying,
determining
isn't it?
the enzyme or whatever the chemical was, where you had to
Yeah.
pair up match the line work. I love that. I spent hours doing all those.
Yeah.
I wish there was more. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed those way more than I was meant to. But it was just so satisfying to line it up and get it right, like on the first go or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's something that I wish the more games had little pointless mini games inside them that most people just gloss over. But I love those way too much.
Yeah, no, it was one of my favorite little disconnects from the main game that you could do by far. And I'm hoping with future content or no doubt the inevitable DLC that'll come soon, there'll be a lot more circuitry puzzles and finding the element or the chemical or whatever it was puzzle as well, because they were the business.
Just give it to me in like the start menu. Like, here's 100 of them of escalating like difficulty.
Can you imagine?
Or like an iPhone, like a companion app, and it's just you have the the mini games on your phone. Yeah, give it to me.
That would be magical. So something that's not as magical, we might pivot into the nitpicks and gripes that we've had with
Sleeves rubbing
Spider-Man.
his
I
hands.
see yous both smiling like Cheshire Cats at me right now. Dream, I know you're hot to trot. Go at it, son.
Yeah, okay. Look, to be honest, I'm not really sure how to tackle this without sounding like a hater. Again, I want to just throw it out there. I think it's a good game. Jono, you were talking about how it was interesting seeing all the villains kind of come in at the end. And it actually reminded me that, like, for a lot of the game, I actually really felt the absence of meaningful boss fights. I think for the bulk of the first two acts, there's really nothing that stands out as as an event kind of fight. Like, in the same way that the Shocker fight, is it Shocker? That's his name, right? In the same way that fight's a sort of event fight, it's a different kind of fight. There are mechanics that you need to learn in order to survive. And almost in the same way that what's his name? Fisk is also a kind of a boss fight early on, and very different to the sort of tutorial fights you're doing up until that point. But then Fisk kind of just becomes the standard template for brutes going forward. So a lot of the things that you learn there are just it just makes that fight kind of lesser, I think, a little bit. So
I think early on, like, the base missions replace boss fights because you're doing them every now and then. They kind of felt like they were bigger than they were because you hadn't done so many of them up to that point.
It's interesting too on the base missions though, because like I'd love to have at least a mid-tier boss come in after that fifth wave instead of it just being 5 waves of enemies with a mixture of brutes and guys with the electric whips and machine guns, pistols, and friggin' rocket launchers. Have some kind of boss in there. Maybe go to the lesser villains from the Spider-Man universe and have them working at these bases. Because I wanted some payoff. Because Dream, as you said, outside of that Fisk Shocker, which you tackle both them within the first 2 hours, I think, if my memory serves correct.
Yeah, Fisk is Shocker's escaping pretty early on.
And outside of those two, like I stumbled onto the Tombstone sort of boss battle just because I was doing a side mission there, and I liked that battle too because it's pretty well the only boss fight where your aim in that is to provide a cure to this guy to help him to become normal again and quote unquote destructible. I like that, and I like that they mixed some different levels where it was just brute force to start with, and then the fire elements, and he had his fire chain and all that. But yeah, there's a real lack of big bad floating around in this game,
and I think that it interrupts the pacing a little bit of the story. And just talking about the fights, like the base fights are a good example. Like I'll say early on, I don't want to say again, like it was enjoyable, right? Even the combat's enjoyable. The combat only becomes more enjoyable, particularly as you unlock perks. The problem though is that it doesn't seem like, I wouldn't say it's not boring, but it's just not really interesting combat either. And it's a combination of it being really easy. I think it's very easy. Even on the hardest mode, it's still quite easy. And then also the enemy design, just like your Goonie kind of enemies, are effectively the same from start to finish.
Yeah.
You get like variations added in, like Whip Boy and Sword Man and Shield Guy and Big Guy and whatever, and like Rocket Guy and Machine Gun Guy, but like they're all just guys who, you know, you dodge, you jump over them, you shoot webs at them. Like the sword guy's really the only one I can think of where you need to actually time things differently, else you won't have a lot of effect. The rest of them you could just spam, and that to me doesn't seem like it's not the most interesting thing.
Yeah, it does get repetitive.
Yeah, sorry. Still lots of fun, like knocking them up in the air, shooting tons of webs at them, and then slamming them down. Like working out how to do that, I was like, oh, you know, like that's fun.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to make it. Yeah, I think you have to make it fun, which is probably a negative for a game. Like you have the ability to do so many different things, and it was only when I was mopping up all the crimes at the end that I was like, oh wait, I can actually knock a guy down and then use my regular web to like web him to the ground. I didn't realize that all along. Like, so there's a lot of things that you figure out through experimenting, and you have to kind of set challenges to yourself. Like, I'm going to knock every single one of these guys off this roof with my kick because that's fun. And like, yeah, if you wanted to just mash square and occasionally dodge, you could do that as well, and that will work. But it's a little tedious. So you kind of it's kind of on you to make it more interesting than it can be.
Yeah, and it sort of leads you that way with some of the random little side missions where you'll get XP multipliers based off the amount of people you've kicked while web slinging or knocked off this or done ability X
web
or Y
throw,
to them. So it does sort of invite you to go down that path, but you're the one that's got to keep things fresh, because square and triangle and circle to dodge. It's certainly not rocket science. You couple in, hitting square and X together when you're in the air, and you do your little ground pound, and it's almost rinse repeat. Hold in square, uppercut a guy in the air, couple of air juggles. It is. Ground
you know
pound,
what? It's like that in Assassin's Creed as well. It's like that in Batman. Like, you can literally just spam the counter button in Batman, and you'll never get touched, and you'll eventually knock out every single one of the baddies, pretty much.
Yeah, which is, again, I think it goes back to taste. It just doesn't seem like, it's not the most interesting system, though. Surely we could all agree on that.
Yeah. But it's hard.
It is hard. Like, it's hard.
I don't know how I would improve it.
Yeah, exactly. I can't really think of anything either. The one thing I did think of was that, like, you can finish the game without getting a single perk, right? Like getting a single talent on that talent tree. So the talents, maybe if the talents were more meaningful, like maybe if they introduced, like, it is hard because they introduced some cool things, like some really cool things.
Some of the talents are magical, and then some of them are just dog turds. Like the chain finish. The chain finish one's one of the best, where you can do 2 of the executions back to back. Like, that thing alone was just helping so much. And using some of the other abilities where your focus bar gets extra juice from using your Spidey abilities and your gadgets and stuff. Like, there's ways where you can have it where you've got infinite focus almost, and you just cheese your way through everything. But it's certainly a game that they didn't make to be complex and deep as far as a combat system. I think they definitely wanted to make it more of an enjoyable Spider-Man experience.
You don't want it to be like Dark Souls or something. Like, it's Spider-Man. Come on.
Yeah. But I died a few times, getting too eager, jumping into swarms of enemies and getting shot to shit, or mistiming a counter or a dodge. So I died a fair few times playing through my playthrough, which is nice. And I like that there was some risk involved. I found any enclosed space fighting a group is where you can potentially come undone because you can't sort of web sling out of there if you're in a room. But yeah, I don't know. The combat's definitely one of the gripes.
Miles and MJ. I did not like playing as someone besides Spider-Man. The name of the game is Spider-Man. It's not Mary
Spider-Man
Jane.
and friends.
It's not Mary Jane stealthing through a museum talking out loud to herself at a very high volume, trying to be quiet. No. Like, those parts, I understand, like, it's kind of like, here's what's happening while Spider-Man was whatever, but I don't know, I feel like a cutscene would have been better. And I know they're trying to mix it up, but anytime that I'm like, okay, when do I get to be Spider-Man again? I feel like maybe that's a decision that maybe didn't work out as well.
Yeah, I like the MJ stuff, but then when they just went back to the well with the Miles stuff and you're stealthing around again, I'm just like, come on.
I like two of them. So I agree with you, but there are two of them which I really thought were cool.
The Grand Central one was okay.
The Grand Central one, where you get to see Spider-Man and you see him act independently and call it out. I thought that was actually a really cool idea. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The first MJ one, where she's around Fisk's, he's like selling all his stuff. That one was all right because there's a lot of antiques in that room, which, similar to the backpacks, give a little bit of backstory. And I just found myself just rolling around, like wondering what this might be a reference to, or trying to piece it together, even with my like limited understanding of the universe. So I thought those two were okay. The Sable camp ones, just like painful though. I agree that all the Miles stuff, again, just fucking cut him out. I could do without.
Yeah. Ugh. When they start just shooting at you as you are just trying to swing through the air and you have to like dodge them, it's like, come on, man, I'm just trying to get from point A to point B. Leave me alone.
Yeah. You're a security firm hired by the mayor of New York, and you're just firing weapons into the skyline at me, yet I'm saving people's lives. Like, I thought that was a bit much. They were too hyper aggressive, but that's just the path they were on, apparently.
There were some navigation issues. We've talked about web swinging and how amazing that is, but there was something that Colin Moriarty said in his review, which was really interesting, I thought. And like, anytime you have to go slow, the momentum is gone and it almost doesn't work. So if you're like trying to get a specific collectible and you don't hit it on your swing, getting to it can be really frustrating. Like climbing down a wall by like 10 meters or something, or like if you're in the dock area and you're trying to get to a specific little spot near the water, but you overshoot it and you end up in the water, and then for some reason Spider-Man can't swim and you have to like jump and like web yourself out. Those parts frustrated me a little bit, and I think that will be something, because it's so magnetized to take him to a specific point that he's aiming at, or that it thinks that you want to go to, but because you've slowed down, it doesn't work quite as well. Did that frustrate you guys?
Yeah, it's certainly. Oh, sorry, you go, Dream.
Like I know the point. Like I definitely had points where I felt like one backpack I distinctly remember being very difficult to sort of navigate towards. I actually enjoyed it. I was just stoked to have a bit of challenge. I genuinely thought it was like a challenge. Like it was actually a game introducing a bit of a challenge to me in learning the controls and learning how to actually navigate the sensitivity of the controls. Obviously not necessarily the case. It's kind of the trade-off, I guess. Like, to go fast, you've kind of got to have the system geared towards going fast, and I'm happy with the way it turned out, I guess. You know, I think it gives you options to like pull yourself away and pull yourself closer to things often enough that you can kind of get out of most of those situations. But yeah, I never really found it to be too jarring on the experience overall.
It was a bit annoying for me. It felt like it was very much like driving a truck. Like driving at high speed and long winding corners and things was great, but the fact when you slow it right down and you're in a confined space, there was a few backpacks that were, you know, under an eave, a floor up in a building, and you're trying to, you hit the wall and then you parkouring, you run up the wall, and then you go, no, I need to go down. Then you get to the bottom, and then you drop off to the ground instead of, sticking and climbing around the alcove and all that. There was a few times where I'm just like, seriously, Spidey, just get your shit together. I know you've got a lot of life problems, but get that damn backpack and let's keep moving. But yeah, there was a few, I can't think of the exact amount that happened, but it was noticeable for me.
I would have liked to have seen some kind of penalty for bad web slinging. Bit of a controversial thing to say, maybe, because it's fun, it's a great system, but it seems I'm not asking for
losing focus.
Well, I'm not it's not like I'm asking for realism in this game. It's not what I want. But to jump off of the Empire State Building and land flat on the ground to no fall damage and no negative impact on you, Spider-Man, seems bizarre. It seems bizarre that a punch to the face hurts, but that's fine. And it also, I think, would have added a little bit more complexity to what is, otherwise, again, a not super challenging game.
One last thing, I guess, before we move into talking potential sequels is I wish they had maybe some higher level zones. The entire playing field throughout New York, it's a flat surface. Doing any of the bases or going and doing side missions, there isn't a level spike.
Yeah, you're right.
It's noticeable. No matter, you could go and that's, I guess it's good and bad. You can go anywhere right off the bat, which is great. But I would have liked to see some kind of challenge added to going to certain zones.
I think the spike is Sable have more annoying weapons. They have the Gatling guns on top of the vans, and they have the jetpack dudes who are a bit more frustrating. And if you go back and fight a thug crime where it's just a bunch of guys that robbed a jewelry store, they don't really have any powers apart from maybe a couple of them have a gun. So that's probably their version of increasing the difficulty as you go. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, no, I guess that's true. That's true.
Just last little one, sorry, pacing. I think the pacing of some side missions makes it really annoying to actually get to them. And I think you're alluding to that, Jono, when you were talking about the lab ones where you find those little lab stations and you do whatever that is.
The research
stations, sorry. Yeah, I did 2 of those, and the time it takes to actually get through those, you just think, this is crap. Where it's at the same time you get a token for locations by taking the worst snaps in the world in no time at all, and you done, unlockable done. So the pacing can be a little jarring when you start trying to really delve into the collectible stuff.
Yeah, my issue with those with the story was how there's 15 or 20 research stations that Harry Osborn has left for Peter to work on. But every single one that you do as a mission is at boiling point when you start that mission. It's this gas is leaking. You have to fix this now or people are going to die.
The water pressure problem is...
Yeah, exactly.
It's a critical level,
Yeah, critical level. And it's how many of these things are just going to be something just overflowing at this point? But apparently all of them.
Yeah, doubling back to the very first things we were talking about, New York's not a good place to be in the Spider-Man universe. There is,
it's dangerous.
Global tragedies at every turn. But yeah, it's great. The ending is fantastic, and the sort of final credits and final cutscenes that we see certainly lead to some pretty exciting times for a Spider-Man 2 sequel, which no doubt they're already probably working on, and we saw Shuhei Yoshida dropping some feedback on Twitter about talking about on the next one on his Twitter account in discussion with a couple of the creators of Spider-Man at Insomniac, which is exciting. What do you guys think? What was your biggest takeaways? I've got a few, but I'll sort of sit on mine for a second.
I mean, obviously Miles has to feature in it somehow, and I think that people are pretty hungry for that. There's this Miles Morales movie that's animated movie that's coming out, and every time you read an article about the MCU or whatever and Spider-Man's place there's always comments or tweets or make it Miles, cast this actor as Miles. They want him represented in other media besides the comics. And I think that this is a good opportunity, with the way they ended it, to have them both feature in the next game. I don't think they'll just cut Peter out altogether, because it's too major of a character to just do that. So that's where I think that they'll go. The thing that I'm really curious about is the setting, because it's not often you'll get consecutive games in the exact same map. I can't even think of any that have done it, or any AAA games. South Park, one game to the next, that was the same town. They found a way to make it different, and you can get away with that because it's a cartoon and there's different like the show evolved over those years, and there was settings that weren't in the first one. But something hyper realistic like Manhattan, they've already done that. I don't know how they can. You can't redo Manhattan, really. All they can do is, I thought, maybe add like Brooklyn or Queens, where Peter's from, more of those boroughs of New York, even if it's like you have to go to a loading screen or a subway station to get there, and it's, you know, another huge map. That was something where I wonder what they'll do, because as awesome as it is to swing around Manhattan, I feel like just adding a new story is going to feel like DLC.
Yeah.
No, that's justified. I think that's justified.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. It's a good point. I can't think of any either. I don't need a sequel. I think this game has just done really well for itself. Like, I just think, like, obviously we're going to get a sequel
on Twitter.
No, like, obviously
you're getting 2 sequels, brother.
Obviously we're
this
gonna
is a trilogy, son.
Whatever. Look, I just
it's made way too much money to not make a sequel.
Yeah,
it's making a lot of money.
I know. Yeah, of course it is. It's a good game. Like, it's a very enjoyable game. And it's a hot IP as well. Like, it's a really hot IP. So of course, it was always going to get a sequel if it was if the game delivered on what fans wanted. I think the game is obviously delivering on what fans want. Don't ask me what the hell is going to be in the second one. It's, who knows? Like, who could have picked that this would be the story for this game? You know, just it's Marvel character hero, you know, just explosion. Who knows where it's going to lead to?
I'd like to see some like side missions that include some of the other heroes.
Well,
like
there's DLC, right? There's DLC for this.
Yeah,
game.
there is. But I think you know, the people that we know who are in Manhattan, like Daredevil and Jessica Jones, I feel like instead of just going and finding a missing pigeon or something, it could be like a mission where you actually team up with them for a small contained.
That would be great.
Mission. Kind of like in Arkham, there was a few missions with Nightwing where you would team up and you could switch between those two, and that was heaps of fun. I think that they could do that with the Fantastic Four or with Daredevil, or just to incorporate that world to make it a bit bigger. And it don't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be the Avengers. There's smaller characters like Luke Cage and Jessica Jones that would make it, just keep it a bit more variety in those side missions that often were fairly repetitive.
Yeah,
a lot of ways to improve. Exciting.
100%. I'm wondering if it's going to almost be like the latest God of War film, where Peter Parker is going to take Miles under his wing and show him the ways of the spider, almost, and have him as the young apprentice and train him up, and then we might see a bit of a time jump to an older Miles. I really got excited in the final sting where we see Norman Osborn go into his secret lab, and we don't know if it's Harry Osborn, we don't know if it's Eddie Brock in this big stasis chamber with the symbiote in there, which obviously in most Spidey lore goes down the Venom arc. Venom is, you know, he's my boy. He's pretty much my favorite character in all of superhero world. So I saw that and I was like, oh my fucking god! Like, I was like on the edge of my seat, like so excited, grinning like there's no tomorrow.
So Brendan, do you want, on that note, do you want to see a Venom and a symbiote suit story in DLC or in a whole next game? Because I feel like that was the obvious suit omission out of those ones that were like, there's 24 suits and there's not like the most popular one, really.
I think it's going to be the whole next game. I think the second Spider-Man game will probably be based around Venom and probably Norman Osborn transitioning into full-fledged Green Goblin is where I see it happening. And it ties into that Ultimate universe we were talking about earlier. Like in the Ultimate universe, the symbiote was actually man-made. And, Oscorp manufactured this symbiote.
Ooh,
so
yes.
the sort of threads connect. And I'm so excited. They did mention Eddie Brock exists in this universe. We don't really deal with him at all in this game, but there was a mention to it. But maybe Harry Osborn becomes Venom or an offshoot of that in this. I don't know, but that got me so excited. That was like worth the price of admission for this game alone. Just seeing that, going, oh shit, my man's coming.
Yeah, it would be interesting if Norman Osborn is like the main villain in the second one, but it's that build up for the third game of Harry becoming that next villain. I wonder if that's
already talking about the third game.
Oh man, bring it on! PS5.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a PS5 exclusive. Spider-Man 2.
And the return of Doc Ock in Spider-Man 3.
Yeah,
it's happening. It's happening.
That's one of the things about Spidey is, unlike some of the other superheroes, there's no shortage of really good villains that they can go in on, and that's not even to speak of ones that have like a remix on them, like the way that they have done Doc Ock in this game. And I mean, maybe this version of Doc Ock is the same as he is in certain universes, but compared to the versions that I've seen, I think that with a good team of writers that Insomniac obviously has, there's a bit of, and there's also freedom from Marvel to do what they want to do, what their vision is, which we can see from the way that they handled Aunt May. I think that, it's exciting to kind of speculate, and we've got many years of that ahead of us.
Oh, yeah. Just that little teaser, that little taste, little crumb was enough for me to get excited for the inevitable Spider-Man sequels showcasing Venom in whatever regard. I'm like, yep, I'll be there day one with my cash saying, take it. So, closing thoughts. Maybe give us like a paragraph review or something, like a sell point of this game. Pitch this game to the masses that for some reason haven't played it, are listening to a spoiler cast, and want to get the hot takes. Throw one last hot take here before we bake this out for a second.
Go, Sam.
Okay, so I think this is a fun, family-friendly game that is also a pretty good introduction to the Spider-Man universe. I think that it is very easy to pick up and very enjoyable to play. I think that there's something in this game for, I'll say, beginners and Spider-Man enthusiasts alike. And I'll say 7 out of 10.
I like that. Ooh, I like what you said. Can I just be lazy and say I endorse the Dreams takes there. It's well worth your time. It's one of the best games out this year. One of the best games I've played over the last few years. Another home run PlayStation exclusive, which as an Xbox fan, breaks my heart a little bit saying those types of things. But yeah, it definitely there's no gated entry to this game. Whether you're a tried and true Spider-Man fan from way back, or maybe this is your first foray into the universe, it's accessible, which I think is great, and it's accessible from a narrative perspective as well as just a playability perspective as well. But well done, Insomniac.
Absolutely. I haven't got much to add to that. I'll just say, like, if you play games to have fun, this is a game for you, because even the least fun things in this game are still really fun. I should say the least, like, even the most mundane things, like swinging around, like usually traversal or getting from one point of the map to the other is just something you have to do, whether it's driving a car in GTA or, riding a horse in The Witcher. People often complain about how that controls, but swinging around in this game is so much fun. So everything after, like, if you decide that swinging around isn't fun anymore because I've been doing it for 5 minutes. There's a mission to do. There's a crime to intervene. Like, yeah, it's a fun game. That's all I have to say.
You went the nice route with that at that last sentence. I was going to like interject and be like, if you don't think web slinging's fun, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
That's where I was going to go.
I mean, there is a
you're the
limit.
voice
Like,
of
you
reason.
can't just web swing for like 20 minutes nonstop.
That's true.
I think I could.
One,
I think I could. Yeah.
just cut laps around the Empire State Building, just in a big circle. And while you're doing that, one last thing before we say goodbye, play with the photo mode.
Oh, yeah.
It is some of the best experiences in this game too that is unrelated to any of the gameplay. It is so damn good, and you can get some magic. I've got it on the PS4 Pro, and holy crap, it creates some gorgeous images that are worth, using as phone wallpapers, computer wallpapers, or just, who knows, printing them and sticking them on your damn walls.
Yeah,
it is great.
Some of the photos that you see out there are pretty amazing. It's really cool to see what the creatives can do with a good photo mode in a game. And my last word before we sign off is, if you're interested in all these different suits in the game, go watch the video on youtube.com/weare8bit. I've broken down every one of them and done the research for you.
100%. Well, gentlemen, thank you for co-hosting this debut Spoilercast here on the Hungry Gamers podcast RSS feed. Excited to do many more of these when we get a few more AAA titles that are worth our time and worth our discussion. Listeners, we hope you enjoyed this. Send your feedback to hello@8bit.net on the email, or hit us up on the socials individually or as a collective at weare8bit. But until next time, 8-Bit Nation, much love.
Stay hungry.
You've been listening to The Hungry Gamers, one of many gaming and geek culture related podcasts from the 8-Bit Collective over on 8bit.net. Check out more episodes on your podcast service of choice. And while you're there, please be sure to rate and subscribe. Until next time, boys and girls, stay hungry.